Hello and good morning friends, welcome to CEC live lecture. Dear friends, today in this session we are going to talk in our series on business research management, and today we would be covering the basics of research. Dear friends, research has become the integral part of one's life. When we see the entire world, this competitive world is progressing on the basis of the research. So dear friends, why research is so important is important to be answered. So we would be discussing on the basics of research in today's lecture, and for this discussion we have once again with us in our studios Dr. Namita Rajput. Dr. Namita Rajput is a principal in Sri Aurobindo Evening College, University of Delhi. Dr. Rajput is an eminent professor who believes in sharing knowledge. She has authored numerous books and a number of articles have been published in reputed journals. Dear friends, if you want to ask questions from Dr. Namita Rajput, then you can call straight in the studio. Our toll-free number is 1-800-110-430. This is the number through which you can ask questions from Dr. Namita Rajput live. You are just requested to call in the last 10 minutes so that the lecture goes uninterrupted and your queries are also resolved in the last 10 minutes. So let's welcome our guest Dr. Namita Rajput and let's try to understand what are the basics of the research. Hello ma'am, welcome to the lecture.
Good morning friends. We have today with us a very important and pertinent topic, that is the basics of research. In every minute detail, we need research, we need analysis, be it the population of the country, be it the national income of the country, be it any aspect, even the daily aspects need research. Research is basically the synthesis of the information and giving it a concrete shape is basically called as a research. So on the technical aspects, we would be covering on the basic types of research, the research meaning, etc. So we would be starting with the research definition. Research is a systematic approach to obtain and confirming new and reliable knowledge. So basically research is not all about just collecting the information. It is also about collecting the information, confirming that the information is true and correct, and of course giving it a concrete shape. And of course the knowledge which you gather is also reliable and also from the reliable sources. Everything, the basics of which depends upon the research, because whatever analytics we do, whatever research we do, we need to have a proper meaning and the sources of the information which is required to report to the various sources from which we need research. So research is a systematic approach to obtain and confirming the new and reliable knowledge, systematic and orderly. So this is a very important concept, that is whatever research we do, it has to be systematic, it has to be orderly. Orderly means it follows a series of steps together, and of course it has a purpose in the new knowledge which must be reliable. So this is a general definition which applies to all disciplines. So be it a language course, be it a social science, be it a science, be it mathematics, everywhere we need research. So research is basically a synthesis of the various steps together to collect the information and giving it a very different meaning to it. And of course that information which is as a result of the synthesis of information is very vital for each discipline for which we require research. And of course we have to know this, that research is not all about just the collection. It has to follow a series of steps. It has to follow a very important orderly steps for which we need research. Now what is research is not all about. So we would be covering in this particular slides. Research is not. The first is accidental discovery. Any accidental discovery may occur in structured research process, usually takes the form of a phenomena not previously noticed. It may lead to a structured research process to verify or understand the observation. Now we have to understand this. Whenever we start a research, we have to have a basic purpose behind it. We have to have an objective behind it. But in the process of research, if you accidentally form certain things which were not previously noticed, or any kind of a phenomena which is very new to the world, this will also not be called as research, because you never had a purpose to do it and it was recovered accidentally. So we do not Consider a research which has been accidentally discovered. So these are the key points which every researcher must know, because whatever discipline we do, whatever aspects we do, there has to be a very important pertinent fact that any accidental recovery which is a result or the byproduct of the research process will not be called as a research. And of course, research is not data collection. An intermediate step to gain a reliable knowledge. Collecting reliable data is a part of research process but is not called as a research. Definitely these are the pertinent steps or the basic things which we require to call it as a research, but we will be not calling a data collection as a research. Data collection is a process of collecting the information, and of course it becomes a reliable step of a research. Now, searching out the published research results in the libraries or on the internet. This is an important early step of research. The research process also includes the synthesis and the analysis, but just reviewing of the literature is not research. Now here there is one more important point which has been highlighted in this slide, is that when you are the previous steps which we have talked about is that the only accidental recovery will not be called as a research. Similarly, the data collection is also not called as a research, and of course the searching of the published research results in libraries or the internet is also not called as a result. But you should keep this in mind, that these are the small particular steps which becomes the part and parcel of the research process. Now, searching out the published research results in the libraries or the internet, this is an important early step of research. The research process also includes the synthesis and the analysis of the information, but just reviewing of literature is not called as a research. Now coming on to what research is, that is, what do we call as a research? The first, searching for explanation of the events, phenomena, relationships and the causes, that is what, how and why things occur. Are these interactions? Definitely the first part is all about that when you are giving a particular explanation to whatever the events happened, you are giving what, how and other various meanings to that process. We call it as a research. We are giving a particular conclusion that whatever steps we started, and this is the conclusion. So research is giving a meaning to what, how and why the things are occurring. So basically you are giving a kind of a interactions, a kind of a meaningful information to all about a research. The second is, the research is a process that is planned and managed to make the information generated credible. The process is creative, it is circular, always leads to more questions. Of course, research is called as a process, and you must understand what is a process. A process is called as a series of steps in which you cannot bypass one step after the other. You have to follow a particular step. Like for example, you start with a why, that why do you want to research? Then you come on to collecting of the information, you apply certain techniques to give a meaningful information, and of course the conclusions which you draw is always in a circular form. That is, wherever you started you come on to that, and again after coming on to a process, again the new research questions will emerge, that whether the conclusions which has been drawn out of the research question which you started, is it applicable to all disciplines, or it is varying for the various disciplines, or it is particular to one subject, or it varies to other subjects as well. So this process leads to more queries, more questions, and the research is an unending process, because one thing leads to the other, the another thing leads to the other. So this is always in a circular form which has got no end. But yes, you have to keep this in mind, that the research is all about giving a conclusive evidence to what, how and when happened, number one. Number two, it follows a particular series of the process, which means that a series of steps will follow, and only then the research questions will be answered, which will again lead to another questions, and hence we call it as that this is in a circular form. Now, all well-designed and conducted research has a potential application. Further, to see the applications can be due to users not trained or experienced in a specialized methods of economic research and reasoning. Researchers often do not provide adequate interpretations and guidance on applications of research. So researchers are responsible to help the users understand the research implications. Now this particular slide has got only one concept, and the one basic crux and USP is that whatever research you do, it must have certain implications. Any research which has been undertaken without any implications has got no meaning. That whatever you are doing, you must be, implicating to certain things, you are implicating to certain users. So whenever you start the research work, you must see this, that the research outcomes will be used for what? Who will be the users for what? Otherwise, if the research has got no meaning, no implications, then whatever you are doing for research has got no meaning. So one thing has to be kept in mind, that before you start any kind of a topic for research, you must understand the implications for it. Only the implications make the research more meaningful, more pertinent in the research areas. Now coming on to a public good. The public research is a public good, maybe more rigorous, objective, because it is subject to more scrutiny. Then coming on to a private research. The private research may also be rigorous, but the research on a company's product may be questioned as biased. So one thing has to be kept in mind again, that when you are going for a public research, the public research has got more rigorous nature because it is used by the public at large. You have to be more cautious about it, and a lot of scrutiny has to be done before it is launched, and more of information has to be collected. The synthesis has to be perfect. Perfection has to be brought in, because this is a public research and objectivity is the main at the core of the public research. Whereas if you compare this with the private research process is also a kind of a rigorous process, but not as rigorous as public. But similarly, the research outcomes here can be questioned, because you are talking about one company, you are talking about one product, you are talking about one individual. So here the role of subjectivity is higher rather than objectivity. Now taking it forward, what is a research? It has to be a careful research or inquiry into a subject to discover the facts or investigate, and it implies a systematic search of a problem and resulting in discovering new facts. So here we started from a careful research or an inquiry. Any researcher which you start the research, there has to be a one question, that is what you want to interpret, what you want to discover, what is your research question. So the research starts from an inquiry, followed by the particular discovery facts or investigate. Then you would start investigating about the topic which you have started. So this is the basic concept of a research, followed by, you must keep this in mind, that it has to follow a particular approach. You have to be very systematic, very pertinent, very careful in taking all the steps. Because you're starting with a problem and coming on to a solution. So it results in discovering of the new facts which can be revealed only by a careful investigation of the facts which you have started from this. Now research is a systematic inquiry aimed at providing the information to solve the problems, and according to Burns, a systematic investigation to find answers to the problems, and according to Burmel, the sociological research primarily committed to establish a systematic, reliable and valid knowledge about the social world. Now what is a Clifford Woody has to talk about a research? Research comprises of defining and redefining the problems, formulating the hypothesis, suggesting the solutions, collecting and organizing and evaluating the data, making deductions and reactions, and conclusions and testing the conclusions, and to determine whether they fit the hypothesis or not. Now this is a very important definition given by Clifford Moody. He says what? That first of all, you start defining a research problem. For example, you want to discover what is the impact of rising FDI on the national income, for example. So it is all empirical in nature, it is data based. So you start with a problem, and then you start defining a hypothesis, that yes, there are two types of hypothesis. One is a null hypothesis and one is the alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis always negates the relationship, that there is no significant relationship of rise of FDI on the national income. whereas the alternative hypothesis is just on the contrary of the null hypothesis. So then after taking the hypothesis in the beginning of it, you start evaluating the research question which you have started, then you start putting certain techniques to it, and you start coming on to the conclusions and whether to accept the null hypothesis or to reject the null hypothesis. Now one thing has to be kept in mind, that if the null hypothesis, the probability value is less than 0.05, the result is that we are accepting the null hypothesis, that is, the significant relationship exists. On the contrary, if the p-value, that is the probability value, is greater than 0.05, the null hypothesis is accepted, which states that there is no significant relationship of the hypothesis which you have started as a null hypothesis. That is, when you started with this, we conclude that there is no the relationship or a significant relationship of the foreign direct investment on the national income. So this could be wrong, this could be right, but yes, the data has to talk about, the data sources have to be correct, the techniques which you apply have to be appropriate, and then finally the conclusions which you draw has to be correct. And of course, the conclusions will implicate and give the final implications of your research study, and whether they are significant or not will depend upon the hypothesis which you have taken, the overall benchmarks which you have taken, and whether the null hypothesis is greater than 0.05 or not. But there are so many techniques, it's not about only the p-value. According to the nature of the problem, the technique will vary. There are quantitative techniques, there are qualitative techniques, but yes, which technique will suit you depend upon the nature and the type of the research problem which you have started. Now coming on to a social science encyclopedia of the concept of a research. The manipulation of the things, concepts or the symbols for the purpose of generalizing to extent, correct or verify the knowledge, whether that knowledge aid is constructive of the theory or in a practice of an art. Now coming on to a very simpler definition, any honest attempt to study a problem systematically or to add man's knowledge of a problem, it may be regarded as a research. The aim, as far as I can see, is the same in all the sciences. Put simply and curiously, the aim is to make known something previously unknown to the human beings. It is also to advance the human knowledge, to make it more certain, or better fitting the aim is, and I have said, discovery. So here we are trying to find out which already people know, one, and which the people does not know earlier. So it is having a both, that is adding knowledge or adding value to the existing piece of knowledge, or it could be discovering certain things which are new to them. But in any case, you have to be very cautious about the steps which you have taken, the orderly steps. They have to be systematically applied, and it could be put it simply that whether you are adding something new to the existing piece of knowledge is also called as a research, or you are adding something which the earlier is not known to people is also called as a research. So any alteration, novation or new things is called as a research. So research is a way of examining your practice. So practice has got a correct connotation about the meaning of the research. Research is not just acquiring a set of skills, but more than that. Research is a way of thinking, examining critically the various aspects of one day-to-day professional work, understanding and formulating guiding principles, and govern a particular task, and developing and testing new theories for the advancement of practice or a profession. So this is a very comprehensive and a detailed definition of the research. Now coming on to research is a habit of questioning. You're not never satisfied with whatever is there. You try to reveal and unveil the various parameters, frontiers and paradigms of the research questions. So what you do is the first question. Systematic examination of the observed information to find answers. 2. Instituting appropriate changes for a more effective professional service. They are all, you are in a habit of questioning the various types of research, and this is also called as a research. So let me take few examples. that is the set of questions which are asked by the psychologist, counselors and the social worker to give a basic definition of the research. What are the most presenting problems of my clients? What are the most common underlying problems? What is their socio-economic background? Why I am successful in some cases and not in others? What resources are available to help a client with a need? How satisfied my clients are and with my services? ? What intervention strategies are needed for a problem? So these are just the examples which are in front of you so that you come to know what a research basically means. If you are into a marketing research, you will always, talk to yourself, are your customers happy? What particular more strategies can make them more happy? Because a satisfied client is a satisfied market. So these are the basic questions, that what is the psychographic analysis of your customer? What extra they need? What is their present need? Are they happy with the product? What new features do they want? What are the changing taste and preferences of the consumers? So these are the various questions which you have to ask to yourself to make your product more effective, and the answers could be only revealed by a good piece of research. So the market research is a very, very pertinent these days. Any changes in the product is the result of a good and a systematic research which has been undertaken in the market study. Now again, a few set of more questions to give you a clarity on the research. Examples are set by the questions by the consultant and the professionals. Which is the most effective intervention for a particular problem? What causes X, or what are the effects of Y? What is the relationship between two phenomena X and Y? How do I measure the self-esteem of my clients? How do I ascertain the validity of my questionnaire? What is the attitude of community towards an issue? How attitude can be measured? How to take an unbiased sample. Now see, when you talk about research, the concept, the meaning is like an ocean. Research is an ocean, I would say, because there are so many angles, so many definitions of the research. Again, we are human beings. We are into various fields. We are into various knowledge networks. We are into various setups. Some people are academicians, some are industrialists. Some are various, into various, like they are doctors. So their paradigms would be to go in for a research of those medical problems for which there is no medicines or there is no treatment available. Similarly, for a teacher, the research areas would be to explore certain new ways and pedagogies to make their students happy. Similarly, those who are into a hospitality, they would always try to reveal certain strategies to make their travelers, to make their customers more happy. So there are so many questions which are pertinent in the various sectors, but yes, overall the analysis, the reporting and the conclusions makes a lot of difference, which is only and only a byproduct of a good piece of research. Some pieces of research are difficult to quantify because they are qualitative in nature. Then of course you have to use certain econometric methods and techniques to put them measurable, because ultimately you have to measure the techniques. As far as the qualitative research work is concerned, it is difficult to measure, but yes, we are having certain very good piece of methods in econometrics these days, especially in the social sciences, which can convert the research into a very useful piece of information. And on the contrary, if you talk about the quantitative research, it is very difficult to collect the data if it is primary work, and if it's a secondary work, then the data sources have to be very useful and important. But anyhow, you have to be very innovative, very, very creative, and very, very accurate and pertinent when you apply any of the research technique to convert your research into a meaningful, useful piece of research. Now, there are so many questions which have to be talked about, like from a marketer, from an academician, because their area is different, their concern is different. So we would be talking about these areas in the coming lecture. Thank you so much. So we have learned till now what is a research. So let me give you a recap in one slide about what we have learned in the earlier part. To investigate some existing situation or problem, to provide solutions to a problem, to explore and analyze more general issues, to construct or create a new procedure or a system, to explain a new phenomena, to generate a new knowledge, and a combination of two or more of any of these. So this definition is given by Husse and Husse in 1997. So we have done till now the basics of a research, that what is it all about, what are the basic steps which we have taken, what are the pertinent topics which we have to take care of it, that what is called as a research and what is not called as a research, etc. So let us learn how to read a piece of a research. You have to locate and read a few articles from within a field you are comfortable with. Read the studies that you are of interest to you. Read the abstract first. Identify the research question and objectives. What did the researcher choose a particular setting or a sample? What were the methods chosen to collect the data? What were the most important findings? Do you not over concern with the statistical analysis, and be critical but objective? Now in this part, these things are very important which are in front of you. That whatever topic you want to start for a research, start reading about it. Whatever are the existing articles, just give a thorough reading to it. After reading those articles, you will be having an insight of that what a particular topic the researcher has chosen, how he has been sailing through his research, what was the process he adopted or a research methodology he chose to find the conclusive evidence of the research. Then, for example, you saw the research abstract first. Now, what is an abstract? Abstract is a very synoptic and a very crisp aspect of your research. It covers basically the four aspects. What is the topic which you have taken? How you have investigated, that is the data and methodology. Third, what are the results or the conclusions of your research work, and finally the implications. So when you read the abstract of the research papers, it is very, very clear of the basic understanding of the research paper which is in front of you. It is going to give you a thorough insight of the results of the topic which the researcher has taken. So whatever topic which you want to choose or which you want to choose is a very difficult thing these days, because people are already into it, because you want to do something which the others have not done. So for example, some people have taken the importance aspect of it, you can see the effect of it. So you have to collect the information which has people already done it. So this is what is called as a literature review or the review of literature. Then of course you have to be very particular about the literature review, because there are certain Indian studies which are available, there are certain international studies which are available. So you must conclude that the Indian studies they talk about the topic like this, and the international studies they talk about this. So overall synthesis of the research review is going to give you a research gap. On the basis of the research gap, you choose your topic, because the research gap, it can only be brought about after a thorough literature review. So this is one thing you have to keep in mind, that the first thing which you have to start when you are doing a research work is to see the existing piece of work, find out their conclusions, find out the research gap. On the basis of research gap, you formulate your own hypothesis, you formulate your own objectives, and then you can start your research on a big way. But yes, if you are not already doing what others have done, then it is not going to make any value addition, or it is not going to mark any kind of a difference to the research world. So be specific, be different, be focused, be narrow are the basic key points of a research. Now coming on to a very important and the pertinent aspect of today's lecture, that is the process of research. It consists of enunciating the problem, deciding on the research design, formulating an hypothesis, collecting the facts or the data, analysis of the facts, drawing the conclusions, validating the hypothesis or rejecting the hypothesis. The research therefore calls for a certain skills which needs to be acquired. First, curiosity to solve puzzles. 2, lengthen your attention span. 3, using the library and computer resources. 4, writing and editing. 5, knowledge of quantitative techniques, and the list is endless. Now, of course, you have to be very particular about these points. Unless and until you are very curious about the puzzles, then you're not a researcher. There should be a certain set of questions which should be honking your mind that I want to explore the real piece of research work, because nowadays there is a lot of value to your research work. Whatever you want to do, you have to put in your curiosity into it, that yes, what is the different angle which you want to study and explore, followed by nowadays there are a lot of things which divert your attention, like mobile phones, social websites, etc. So you have to draw yourself for a while from these things to increase your attention span. Now, of course, you have to be very particular about exploring the digital libraries, which are, you can subscribe these libraries and sit at home. Given a password, you can see the e-resources sitting at home. So you have to be, very at your convenience. You can scan and span the new research pieces of work, which is available on Google Scholar, on Abesco websites, on other e-libraries, resources. These things are very important to explore, because only these things are going to give you the research gaps. Then, of course, you have to have a very particular knowledge for the quantitative techniques and the qualitative techniques. Only then, after putting the information and the data which you have collected, if it's survey-based data, the first thing you have to make is a questionnaire. The questionnaire has to be very structuredly formulated, after taking into consideration the advice of the academician, if you are doing a research on the bankers, the policy makers, etc. And there has to be a testing before you collect the information, that whether the questionnaire, there has to be testing of the questionnaire, that whether it is reliable or not, whether it is content validity is there or not. So once you are satisfied on the different angles about the questionnaire, then it must be circulated through Google Forms if you are using a digital media, or if you have the respondents which are nearby, you can just circulate physically. So, you can collect various methods together to collect the information if it's a primary study which is based on the questionnaire which you have formulated. So, after the data has been collected, you have to choose a particular software, and nowadays for the social sciences we have an SPSS, various versions, like we have nowadays SPSS 22, which has very advanced features. So, the moment you click on the data and the technique which you want to prove and which you want to say, for example, I want to have the multiple regression. So there is a question, there is a drop down menus which are there, and these softwares are so user friendly that on the drop down you select a particular technique which you have adopted, and then of course put on your data into that, and you can do a final analysis of this information. Then whatever are the results, there are certain key areas, key factors which are a part and parcel of the research output, which is of course calculated by the software in front of you. So you can use those thresholds like the p-value, it could be the t-value. So according to the thresholds and the values which are mentioned in that, you can calculate the research conclusions, and of course on the basis of these conclusions you can write your report writing, and which is the final objective of doing a research, that you need a particular research report which is used for various research organizations. If it's a market research, it could be used for an academician. If it's a PhD, it could be used for a researcher. A small piece of work, it could be a research paper. A big survey, it could be used by the doctors, by the medical practitioners, by the lawyers, etc. Because if they are wanting to start with some amendment in the constitution or maybe something, then the public movement data also is required, and eventually you need a report. So the report can be very easily calculated by using a particular softwares according to your own choice. And we have our softwares, we have SPSS, we have financial review techniques, like we have e-views, etc. So according to your nature and the purpose of the research, you can choose any of these and find out the research process and the conclusions. Now, coming on to what is the characteristics of a research project. If you have to start with the research project, what are the basic characteristics? The first is a controlled. This concept implies that when you are examining the relationship of two variables, your experimental setup should neutralize or minimize the effect of extraneous variables. So, this thing has to be kept in mind, that there are so many factors, so many parameters which could affect the same thing. For example, the demand can be affected by the price, it can be also affected by the income, it can be also affected by the competitive prices available, by the taste and preferences of the consumers, by the demand and by the other factors, that is the supply. It could also be done by some other factors which are beyond your control. So it is not that there is only a relationship of price and demand, there are also relationship of demand with other factors also. So if you are trying to reveal a relationship of demand and price, then of course you have to keep the other factors as constant and controlled. So this is the basic crux of the research, that whatever parameter you want to examine, the other parameters have to be ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus means they have to be constantly under control, under check, to find and reveal a true relationship of only the two variables, because there are multiple variables which are affected or which are affecting a particular say demand. So you have to keep these factors as constant, only then the results of demand and price could be revealed. So these are the characteristics of a research project, whichever you are taking, is that you have to keep certain other factors under control. Now the other factor is a rigorous. The procedures followed must be relevant, it must be appropriate, and it must be justified. Now see, in the areas of today's research, there are so many factors, there are so many research areas, there are so many methods which are available to a researcher. But what you have to choose is that you have to be very rigorous in your approach as far as the appropriateness of that particular choice is concerned, the relevance is concerned, and it must be justified that if you are using this particular technique is because of this. So you have to be very controlled in your approach, you have to be very rigorous in your approach. The rigorous also tantamounts to relevancy and the accuracy and the appropriateness of the techniques which you are using. And of course, the third important factor of your research work is that it has to be systematic. Now let us see what systematic is. The systematic is all about a procedure adopted must be followed a logical sequence. Now of course, when you talk about a logical sequence, it is very common knowledge to everyone that a step which is at first step has to be followed, only then you can reach the final step. For example, you are in class nursery right now, you cannot do the question of class 12th. So this makes more logic to give you the questions which are only related to plus 2 level and when you are in 12th, and giving you the questions which are available, which are only relevant for the nursery should be given at the nursery level. So unless and until you cross first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, only then you can reach class 12th, and then you will be eligible for all those parameters, difficulties, etc., which are only available for the class 12. So you cannot bypass any of the minute step. This is what is called as a systematic thing, that there has to be a proper logical sequence for whatever you want to do. Then of course the next is a valid and verifiable. So till now we have done the 4 factors. Let us have a look on this. First is controlled, which we have already done. The relationship is very important because the other factors have to be ceteris paribus. Then it has to be rigorous, that is the accuracy has to be taken and the appropriateness factor has to be taken. The third is a systematic step. Systematic means that you have to follow a logical sequence for whatever things which you want to do. And the last is your valid and verifiable. That is whatever results which you calculate must be verifiable as per certain thresholds. And the last is your empirical, that is the conclusion drawn are on the hard facts. No role of whims and fancies is required to calculate your results. It has to be drawn from the hard facts. Then it must withstand the critical scrutiny, that if you are under a question mark, then you must withstand with all the facts which are available for the critical scrutiny. Now the actions required for a good piece of research work. Now there are certain steps, certain minute things which you have to keep in mind to make your research work a appropriate and a good piece of research. So let us see what are the basic steps for this. The first is that it has to be a clearly defined purpose. The research becomes more meaningful, more accurate, more pertinent, more verifiable if it has a particular purpose. So the purpose which you choose as a researcher must be clearly defined. It is discussed between the actual problem with those of the perception of the decision maker. Now see, there are a few factors which you have to keep in mind. Like for example, when you start your research work, then you have certain apprehensions in mind, you have certain perceptions in mind, and when you start and when you actually end your research, there is a huge and a hell lot of difference of what you started and what you are at the final stage. So this is what you have to keep in mind, that what is your purpose. The purpose has to be clearly defined. Then the second is that research process should be detailed. A detailed research proposal is made so that any other researcher can understand the methods adopted and repeat the exercise if required. So you have to be very clear as far as the data and the methodology is concerned on every small and minute step which you take. The third is a research design thoroughly planned. The procedures adopted at each step, such as method of sampling, size of a sample, etc., have to be clearly defined. Now, there are certain limitations which should be clearly revealed. For example, I want to do a particular study in 5 schools to generalize about the all various schools in the Delhi and NCR. But yes, I have to be very very thorough in my mind that the results which might be revealed by these 5 schools may not be true. Maybe the sample which I have chosen is also wrong. So these things have to be kept in mind, that we did the survey only for Delhi, but it could be different for various parts. It could be different from Haryana, it could be different from UP, it could be different from Kashmir, etc. Because one question paper, cannot have the same answers. That question papers are different for different states. So these are the limitations, that what you are inferring from these 5 schools may not be true for the other states and for other schools. So these are the limitations that you are, for example, you are carrying a research in only one area. Maybe it only applies to that area also, you cannot apply to the other areas also. So these are the, the limitations. It could be a small sample, which is also one of the limitations, because only if you are choosing a 50 people out of the population, the results may not be revealed and the results may not be true, because those 50 people are only those people who are not for it. So, these things are very important to be kept in mind, and they have to be properly revealed, that we are, doing a small sample, we are only doing for this particular locality, etc. Now, of course, you have to have a very, ethical standards maintained. Maintaining the integrity of data and invasion of privacy, etc. must be maintained. You should not be asking or intervening the questions which intervene the privacy of the people, because they might not want to reveal that kind of a data. So the action required is that you must maintain the integrity of the data. Similarly, and any kind of a invasion of the privacy must be avoided, and it is prohibited for a research to be called as a good piece of research. The adequate analysis must be done at a very pertinent level, because the findings must be detailed and tied to the data collected. It's not that the data collected is for something else and your results are saying something else, or maybe the area which you chose is different. So everything must be in sync with one another. That is why the data which you collected and the results which are revealed should be in sync with one another. Then of course, you have done so much of rigorous work, you have collected the data, you have put on a good appropriate data and methodology, you have controlled the variables, you have not intervened into the privacy of the data collected by the people, and you have taken all the small, pertinent, accurate steps to make your research work till now very good. Now is the time to report your findings in a very clear way. The findings must be presented in a very clear charts. Finding must be logically organized. Executive summary of the conclusions must be presented. Now, this thing has to be kept in mind, that you start with certain research question, which is also called as a research objective. Then you applied certain techniques, appropriate techniques, to find out what you wanted to. You have found out the results in front of you, and now you have the conclusions and the implications and the summary of the results. So if you have to be very particular about these things, a synoptic view must be written, which is called as an executive summary of the summary and the conclusions of the research which you have taken. This has got a significant meaning because nowadays in a very busy life, the researchers also, they do not read the complete papers. They want to just read the executive summary, and if the purpose is solved and the topic is matched, only then they come on to a detailed research paper. So you have to keep this as a mirror, because this is the window through which the outside researchers would peep into your research work. And of course, the making of the abstract must be in a very crisp form, because if the abstract is good, people will not even read the summary aspect of it, because it has all the major 4 contents which are related to your research work. Then is justify conclusions. The conclusions must be based on what the data reveals and not on what is perception of the researcher. Then the research experience is in front of you. More the experience, the greater the confidence. So now we have to come on to the way we have described the research, give it a scientific basis. The Curlinger defines scientific research as a scientific research is a systematic, controlled, empirical, critical investigation of hypothetical propositions about a presumed relationship among the natural phenomena. It has to be systematic and controlled. It means that it must be confidence in the outcome, and empirical, that is, it should be based on data. Then of course the scientific approach is a way of thinking and can be analyzed through the following steps: problem, obstacle, idea, hypothesis, reasoning and deduction, observation, test and example. So we have done it in a very nice way in terms of what a scientific research is all about. That is, you talk about a problem, you start with a research problem, you see the various obstacles which are there to collect the data, then you have an idea of what you want to do, then you formulate an hypothesis relating to it, a reasoning and deduction is done, and the observation, test and experiment is done. So I would like to explain here this particular slide, that there is no a way and the place of subjectivity. The moment the subjectivity comes into play, the research loses its meaning. So as far as possible, research has to be very objective in nature, which is completely based on the empirical work which you have done, the data which you have collected, the precautions which you have taken, and the synthesis which you have done after the applications of the appropriate techniques which are adopted in this regard. So once you have found out the research problem, done it in a very logical and a sequential way, then of course the things are better, and you have done a thorough literature review which talks about the analysis of the existing piece of work which has already been done in the Indian context and the global context. A synoptic view has to be made so that you have a rough idea of what you have done, and eventually you will find out the research gap, you will find out your own research question. So how can you find your own research question is a big question mark, which can only be revealed by a thorough literature review which has been done by you extensively, using e-libraries, using e-resources, using various physical resources as well. So now is the time to make a good hypothesis. I have told earlier also that when you talk about the hypothesis, it is a kind of an assumption which you start. The assumption could be a null hypothesis, and it could be an alternate hypothesis. The null hypothesis negates the relationship, whereas the alternative relationship talks about the relationships. But whenever we start with the null hypothesis, stating that there is no significant relationship between the two variables or multiple variables which you are starting with. And of course, you try and reveal that whether whatever assumptions you have taken, they are true or bad. Then of course we give the reasons, we put the data which you have collected into a particular software. The software is going to reveal the right correctness and is going to even break the ice of your perception. It could be whatever you perceive is wrong. So this is what the research is all about, and this is the magic which it does, that it breaks the perception and it reveals the truth which is in front of the researcher, because whenever you started with your research work, you had some different perceptions, and eventually when the research was conducted, the results are somewhere else. So the reasoning and the deduction could be done after the analysis which has been done, extensive analysis. Then of course the observation, test and experiment is going to give a lot of meaning and shape to your results. So this is how the scientific approach is very, very important in thinking and analyzing the steps which you are following is correct or not. So let me give you a recap of what we did in today's lecture. Just one or two lines are enough to give to what we did. So we started with the research work. Research is all about doing a systematic analysis of your information, your facts, in a very systematic way, and discovering the new facts and the results, followed by we did examining your practice. That is a way of examining your practice. Research is a way of thinking, examining critically the various aspects of one-day to professional work, understanding and formulating and guiding principles, and govern a particular task, and developing and testing the new theories of enhancement of the particular practice. Then you must keep this in mind, that whatever we do have to be logical, it has to be systematic to come on to a final and a good conclusion. Then we did what is not research. Accidental discovery is not research, only the examination is not research, just collecting the information is not research. These are the logical steps which have to be kept in mind to make it a particular, a project, a good project. Now the final thing which I want to state here is that we did also the characteristics of a good research project. The first thing is that you have to have a control over the variables, only then you can reveal a good relationships. It has to be rigorous. The rigorous talks about the appropriateness and the relevance of the data, and it has to be systematic, that is, it has to follow a logical sequence, followed by valid and verifiable aspects, empirical aspects, and whatever the questions which the people ask, you should be ready for the scrutiny also, because subjectivity, I'm saying, has got no meaning in the research. Objectivity gives a lot of good ways in this regard, and of course you have to have a very clear purpose for your research work, and a detailed, thoroughly methodology has to be adopted. Finally the conclusion has to be made. Thank you so much.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us a productive session. Dear friends, if you want to give your feedback for the particular lecture on business research management, then do write to us at info.cec@nic.in. The lecture is going to be uploaded on YouTube soon. Keep watching us, keep writing us. We would be meeting again soon. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.